him to actually gave him the freedom to create what he truly desired to create. And this is why his music stood out in comparison to other quote unquote gangster rappers, because he wasn't actually doing the music for money. Now, did the music eventually make him money? Yes, but it was because he had this assurance from his other business ventures that allowed him to create from a pure place. This is why nobody can tell you anything, right? There's athletes who make millions of dollars who can't say what they want to say on the air. They can't even take a knee on the field without, despite being millionaires, they can't even take a knee on the field without getting reprimanded by their oppressors. So it's just an interesting situation. So yeah, I want to lay out the blueprint for how to retire actually early. And by retire, can you share your definition of retirement again?
My definition of retirement means that you can make money without going to work, and you do whatever you want when you wake up in the morning.
Right. Right. Got it.
Yeah, when I got to that point, I remember I used to call my late grandmother, who I always talk about, who was the first person to introduce me to financial intelligence. And I consulted with her. I'm talking about after I got my PhD. I learned that there's a difference between knowing what you need to do and actually doing it. My grandmother always did it, even if she didn't know as much as me. And I remember I would call her, and I remember joking and saying, you're the only other retired person I know to call that I could call on a Tuesday afternoon at 1 o'clock.
Right.
And so retirement, it's really connected heavily to freedom, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's why I believe you can retire in your 20s.
Yeah.
You really know exactly what retirement really means.
Yeah, beautiful. So knowing what I know now, if I could do it all over again, and I am doing it all over again through my daughter, she's 4 years old. And so I'm thinking about what she needs to have in place to be free. I know you have your new niece. What is she? She's less than a year old, right? She ain't even a year old yet.
Yeah, man. She's about 7 months.
Yeah. So what did you do?
I'll find a little picture of her so you guys can check it out. Go.
And so was the moment you knew she was coming, I know you have your family business meetings. What did you do to ensure her financial freedom as a family right then and there in that moment?
We started going, we're kind of Game of Thrones with it in our family, man. I ain't gonna lie, bro. We're like literally sitting around like, how is the House of Watkins gonna be remembered 1,000 years from now? Everything's about legacy. That's all you got. Your life is short. You're gonna die soon. And so all you got is your legacy. You got your insurance policies, your real estate, your life insurance, your estate plan, whatever it is you put in place, your businesses, your ideas, your culture, whatever it is you pass to your children, that's what's going to live far longer than you do. So my thought was, I said, man, I started thinking, gosh, I don't like, getting older is kind of sad in a way. If you look at it a certain way where you're like, man, I'm getting closer to the end, and it's very quick. 1 minute you're 20, next minute you're 30, then you're 40. You're like, what the hell's happening here?
Yeah.
And I looked at my little niece and I was thinking, gosh, this child has a good chance to be around in the year 2100. And I started to kind of envy that. And I remember thinking, man, I would love to be there around in 2100. I'd love to see it. But I was like, I'm not going to. She is.
Right.
And then by that time, she'll have children, grandchildren, all that. So I said, what can I do that will allow us to really have that impact, that we really want to have in our lives and do something really important. So we started talking about her before she was born. We started talking, we started visualizing. It's a spiritual exercise almost, where I visualize, her as a grown woman. I visualize her graduate from college. I visualize her getting married. I visualize her looking at her picture of Uncle Boyce on the wall and saying, Uncle Boyce, this is my uncle. From way back in 2019, he used to, back in the day, he used to get on the internet and he said did that, and that really, kind of affected me in the sense that I thought about then, just from a mathematical standpoint, very basic little things that you can do where you can really, really rock somebody's world 30 years from today by doing basic things right now. Like, it's very, very hard for a person to change what's happening in 2019, on a massive scale. It's very, very hard. For example, it's very, very hard it's very, very hard to make your kids rich by next year, right?
Yeah.
But it's easy as hell to make your kids extremely wealthy 30 years from now, because you have a ton of time to do it. So that's really what we started doing. So we have trust. We in my will, I was very specific about exactly where my money would go, how it would grow until she was ready, making sure that she did not even know that the money's there, and thinking about specific ways that the money can be applied where it could grow, and also make sure that she doesn't have anything to worry about later on down the line. So those are kind of the conversations we had.
Yeah. So same thing for Jada. So right now, what I'm doing is I'm actually setting up. Well, I have life insurance on me, and I'm making sure that my family is set, and that death benefit will be passed on to them if something were to happen to me sooner, or something were to happen to me later. But one of the things that kicked into gear for me, so I read Rich Dad Poor Dad and when I was in college, and I knew straight off the bat that I was not buying a single family home first. A lot of people say that a single family home is an asset. At the very best, it's a savings account. It's not really an asset. An asset is something that puts money into your pocket, and there's actually no point that a single family home puts money into your pocket unless you sell it or you take out a HELOC, which you have to borrow against the home, right? Even after you paid off the mortgage after 30 years, you still have to pay property taxes and insurance on that home, plus maintenance on a 30-year-old home. So a single family home, while it's touted as this asset, not every home appreciates. And it also depends on when you actually want to sell it, if you ever do decide to sell it. And so I knew I wasn't buying a single family home out the gates. And so my first acquisition of real estate was, I think it was 6 years ago. I think I was 30 years old. It was a 3-family home in Brooklyn. That house has appreciated, and it also cash flows. So for me, when I buy real estate, I buy for cash flow and appreciation. If that occurs, then that's just icing on the cake for me. But 2 years ago, when I hit the 35 mark, I went pretty hard on real estate, and I actually bought 3 homes that year, 3 duplexes. And for me, that was significant in relationship to the 65 retirement mark. I don't plan on retiring. I love the work that I do. I'm gonna do this till the day I die, right? And so, but if I bought those homes at 35, then what's going to happen at 65? Those mortgages are going to be done unless I pay them off early. And so now that's just going to be cash flowing property that I now get to hand to my daughter and say, this is yours. And so at the age when I'm 65, whether I need that for retirement or I die and I get to pass that on, she's literally going to have $10,000 in cash flow that is happening indefinitely for year every single month. Like, because of the decisions that I made when I was 35, she will have $10,000 coming into her family every single month for the rest of her life. And she'll be able to pass that on, as long as the properties are kept, she'll be able to pass that on indefinitely. Like, if we're really talking about generational wealth, it can't be about the highest salary. I really believe that this kind of passive income is really a key, because let's say you start with you got $10 of passive income today, and then 5 months from now it's $50 of passive income a month, and then another 3 months, and now that's $150 of passive income. If we just focus on growing our passive income in any way that we possibly could, real estate as being the most predictable way of doing it that I know of, when we're thinking about generations, I'm passing my daughter cash flow. Not cash flow, meaning that she doesn't have to do anything. I could leave her a big pile, but that pile could deplete. But cash flow is never going to deplete unless she does something to mess up the asset itself.
Yeah, well, I think about income. Income is really something. It's like getting apples off an apple tree, right?
Yeah.
You can't have apples without the tree. And the problem that for Black people is that we need the apples, but white people own all the trees. And what we have to do with our children is we must train them to take the apples they have and plant apple seeds.
Yes.
Because then you have trees, and with those trees you can get all the apples that you need, and it creates a more fulfilling and secure environment under which you can survive economically. Because you're not having to go around with your basket begging other people to give you apples off of their tree.
Right.
So what we got to do is really think about, the Black community's economic landscape, almost like just a bunch of really fertile land, thousands of acres of really fertile land. And we got to go in this generation just planting a whole lot of seeds, so that we can harvest something off this land. And so same thing. So the analogy is with the businesses, we're going in and we're just starting these businesses. And at the same time, while we're planting the seeds and trying to grow something out of the land, we got to learn how to be better farmers. If you're not a good farmer, you can have the best land, but you're not going to get anything out of it. So by being better farmers, meaning creating businesses that have better structure, just really shifting the economic landscape, shifting the culture, Culture is very important. Today with Dr. Claude Anderson, we talked about a code of conduct. There must be a code of economic conduct in every family in order for that family to grow economically. Because if you don't have a code of conduct, what you have is you have people doing whatever they want, acting however they want. You know, like for example, when I have a lecture where I train students how to build your own family bank, which is what that looks like, right? And I said, look, it ain't gonna work if people don't operate in the code of conduct, because what happens, people will come to the bank whenever they have a financial problem and they won't pay you back. You know, and so again, just making a funny joke about being Game of Thrones with it. You know, one of the funny things about Game of Thrones, I don't know if anybody else watches that show or not, but some people think I'm really white for watching that show, but it's a great show. But it's really funny because they have this bank in the background. It's like all these people just fighting, having these wars, trying to get the throne. But the thing is, in the background, they have this company called the Iron Bank. And whenever they want to declare war or conquer new territory or build a new castle, they got to go to the Iron Bank. Yep. And what happens is everybody bows to the bank. Everybody's scared of the Iron Bank, right? And one of the conspiracy theories online is, what is it that this bank has that makes everybody afraid? The biggest, baddest kings are like bowing to the Iron Bank because they're afraid. And what it is that the banks have something where they're able to go and force you to maintain the code of conduct. Like if we loan you this money, you're gonna pay it back, right? And just little things like that make a big difference, because if you have people that don't respect the code of conduct, what'll happen is you'll build a family bank and you'll get some resources. You loan them out to relatives, you end up broke. That's how a lot of athletes go broke. Loaning people money, they don't pay it back because there's no consequences for not paying it back. Well, if you have a code of conduct, then you know if you don't pay it back. My grandmother had a code of conduct. My grandma's rule was, I'll loan you money one time, and if you pay me back, I'll loan you money again. But if I loan you money, you do not pay me back, never ask me for money ever again. It could be 5 years later, she wouldn't loan you anything. So that's an example of a code of conduct.
Period. And for me, my policy for blood is, I'll loan you money the first time. If you don't pay back on time, then don't ask me again. Not even if you don't pay me back. If you don't pay me back on time, then I'm not ever loaning you again. That's literally it. I mean, because I'm giving you a no interest loan. I could be making that money work in other ways. My interest is actually love at that moment in time. But if you actually disrespect the agreement that we've made, then I can't function with you, and you've actually taken advantage of my love in that moment in time. Right. So that's how I think about it. But in terms of so for me, cash flowing real estate has been critical. And I think one of the big myths out there in terms of freedom is that you have to be a millionaire, that you have to like strike big, you got to win the lotto, you got to be CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And while that kind of revenue in terms of salary is great, and I encourage people to go get it, go secure the bag. In order to be free, the simple equation is look at your cost of living and actually see if you can actually create passive income that surpasses that. And so what's unique about Black people in terms of their ability to be free sooner is that we are actually able to be happy and comfortable off of less. And what I mean by that is that because of our economic situation, we are still able to find joy off of a household income of $4,000. We're still able to have joy. Most other cultures would actually kill themselves and jump off the bridge if they had $4,000 of revenue coming into their household. But yet we're still able to smile in the midst of poverty. And we have all the ingredients that are there because in Brooklyn, I have an Asian neighbor. She moved in the hood. She's the only Asian in like a 10-mile radius, literally. She moved in the hood. Her whole family, they moved into the same kind of building that we did. They're like 7 deep in there. It was me, my daughter, and my wife, right? They're 7 deep in there. Guess what they did? 2 years later, they had bought another one deeper into the hood. Deeper into the hood. So they had saved up.
Wait, so they were living in the hood?
Yep. So they were living right next to us. They were the only Asian family in like 10-mile radius, right? But then there were 7 of them. There was like 4 adults and 3 kids. The other 2 adults, which were sister and brother, they ended up buying another multifamily deeper into the hood. So after they had come together and stacked in this one space, I call it house huddling. They all came in and they huddled in this one space. They stacked up their bread. They also had rental income coming from the 2nd and 3rd floors. Once they had stacked up their bread and had enough to make a down payment on another one, then the brother and sister moved out to the one that was deeper in the hood, right? So they were willing to do this, but we aren't willing to do it yet. When you look at a project building, what are we doing? We're house huddling anyways. We are living, it's a lot of us living in small quarters, but because we're not thinking in terms of equity, and we're not thinking in terms of equity, and we can't come together even in a household, we're missing out on an opportunity where it would be cheaper for you to own than it would be for you to rent.
Well, you know, a lot of that, what you talk about in terms of rent versus own, or just even wanting to even become an owner, it really kind of has to come down. It really comes down to culture, and it's not even something that, you know, we can blame totally on ourselves, right? We're not responsible for creating a lot of the mindset that we have. You know, if you read books like Powernomics, Black Labor, White Wealth, you'll see numerous examples where there was a deliberate system put in place for hundreds of years to make sure that Black people never got this crazy idea of actually coming together and building something that's actually going to be strong and sustainable. And so there's a lot of brainwashing that has to be overcome. There's a lot of cycles that have to be broken, you know, cycles of financial abuse, financial neglect, financial irresponsibility, economic anti-intelligence, if you will. When I say anti-intelligence, I'm talking about, you know, even people in our own families who will discourage us and make fun of us if we think we're going to go start a business because our business is not bright and shiny like the big company that everybody works for, right?
Right.
So shifting that culture, I think, means going to a point where we understand a few basic ideas. You know, like, for example, you know, when you talk about a big salary is kind of what we're all raised to sort of aim.
Right.
We were talking about salary earlier. I remember thinking that way. I remember thinking, okay, I want to go to college, graduate, and get a good job, making a good salary. Well, a good salary really can almost be a curse. You know, if you look at NBA players, for example, who get a big salary and end up going broke, their income was more of a curse than it was a blessing because the salary creates a false sense of security. Because basically it's like you're being injected with the most toxic, potent, and addictive drug imaginable. Money affects your brain like a drug. You know, Professor Andrew Lowe at MIT studied the brain, and he said that the region of the brain that's affected when you get money is the same region of the brain that's affected when you snort cocaine. So literally you're being injected with this drug, and you're getting high, and it ain't your supply. You know, and so basically you think about the relationship between a drug addict and the drug pusher, right? So the drug pusher is the person that's paying you this money, giving you these bands, and you're feeling good. You're feeling like you are somebody because you're getting this big salary. Well, they can take that away from you in a second. And so if you ever want to scare a drug addict, just threaten to take away his drug, right? He'll do whatever you tell him to do. He'll do any degrading thing you tell him to do. He'll give up some people. You heard about drug addicts that'll sell their own kids so they can keep access to the crack or whatever, right? So we'll do that. We might not sell our kids, but actually we do sell our kids. We send our children away to other communities to go beg for jobs, but also we sell our souls. Most importantly, we sell our health. We sell all of our free time, you know, et cetera. And so what happens is if you back up that process, what happened was you were being given access to this powerful drug and you did not control the supply of the thing that you needed the most. Yep. And people that understand things like national security and all that, they understand that when it comes to certain commodities, you need to control the supply, like the food supply. The United States government will never let China control our food supply. You know, they'll be like, that's dangerous because they can cut us off, right? So for Black people, we got to understand that controlling your economic supply is part of your security process. I think that a big salary, it may seem like it's great at the time, but what you want to be thinking is when you got this big salary, okay, how quickly can I get to the point where I can control my own money supply as quickly as possible because I'm vulnerable right now.
100%. So the other big mindset shift is that a lot of people call salary income. They think those are synonymous. If you go look in a thesaurus, the salary and income will be together. But when you look at a business, what is income? Income is revenues minus expenses equals income, right? Revenues minus expenses. So what is your salary as an individual? Your salary is actually your revenues. Then you have your living expenses. Your income is actually what's left over at the end of the month. But more people have more month left over at the end of the money than more money left over at the end of the month, right? And so did
you say more month left over at the end of the money?
Yes.
That's funny. I was like, I think you misspoke, but then I got it. That's so great. You're so smart, man. Keep going, brother. Keep going.
You know, most people got more month left over at the end of the money than more money left over at the end of the month, right? You want more money left over at the end of the month. So this is why it's the 21st and the month, you still got more month, but you ain't got no more money, right? Because we've been taught that salary is income. Your salary is actually your revenue. So this is why somebody who's making $100,000, if their cost of living, right, their expenses is actually $90,000, then their income over the course of a year is only $10,000. Where somebody else could be making 40,000, their cost of living is 30, and guess what their income is? It's also $10,000. So when we truly understand business and economics, you understand that your income is what's left over, not what the top line thing that you get, right? And then we all got to deal with the 4 I's, which are one, the IRS, right? They're trying to take 30%. Then you got to deal with inflation, meaning that that gas or that food, the same you're paying more, your dollar's worth less, right? So you're paying more for the same thing. And then you got to watch out for interest, right? Your mortgage at 5.4%, you're actually paying for 2 homes. If you have a 30-year mortgage at 5.4%, you're basically paying for 2 homes. Your interest will be equivalent to what you actually pay for the entire house, right? But that's not the only interest. There's also consumer debt, there's student loans, etc. And then the 4th I is actually ignorance. It's financial illiteracy, right? That's the 4th I that is stopping us from actually achieving freedom. And this is not just for Black people, it's for all people, but we got to be aware of those particular things. And so this is what I'm trying to do for my daughter, because I want her to be free. I want her to be in a position where she never has to work for money. Will she go get money? Yes, but she'll never have to work for money. And so I don't know, what is it in terms of long-term thinking? What do you think stops us from becoming these long-term thinkers where we're thinking about, as they say, the Native Americans thought, 7 generations ahead?
I think that there's kind of a challenge when it comes to poverty. So I saw somebody write an article on something that they refer to as poor people's brain. And I didn't like a lot of what I saw in the article, but they had a point. And one of the points that they made that I certainly agreed with was that a lot of times when you're struggling from minute to minute, trying to just get through the day, it's hard to plan 5 years, 10 years down the line, right?
Right.
Very difficult. So I think that plays a big part, but I think at the same time, we got to remember that we ain't always struggling every single day. If we always were barely on the brink of financial disaster all the time, then I wouldn't be able to go through the hood and find a pair of Air Jordans, because nobody would ever have enough money to buy Air Jordans. Or if somebody has a Popeye's chicken on the corner, the Popeye's chicken wouldn't make any money because everybody would have to eat at home. You know what I mean? Right. Well, you can go places where we're technically poor and see a lot of nice stuff where I'll be like, man, I can't afford that. You know what I mean? And so the question is not so much how deep you are in the struggle. The question is, when you have those moments where you're not in the struggle, how does your behavior change then? Do you see that as an opportunity to make a plan for the future, or do you not? Like, for example, there's a young lady named Rebecca Monique, who's an accountant, who's actually watching us right now. And when I talked to Rebecca, and I'm not going to give out all the business, but one thing that she mentioned to me was when she left the plantation, she said, first thing I did was I paid all my bills for the entire year. So that basically was like, the minute I had some financial breathing room and a little extra cash flow, I made sure I was good long term. Right. I know a lot of people who wouldn't have done that. A lot of people would have just, spent it up and then struggled through the rest of the year. Played that strugglenomics game. So I think a lot of it does come down to personality. Like they have that Stanford marshmallow test, where they tested the kids' ability to delay gratification, and the kids who were able to delay gratification did better in life. So delayed gratification plays a part. I think also culture is big. I see a lot of media that encourages us to just kind of live for the moment and not really think about the future.
YOLO.
Yeah, exactly. And YOLO, that's like the worst advice ever. Like you're kind of like screwing your future self, like when you're just doing stuff and not thinking about the future, right? And so I think that a lot of it is cultural. And again, this is bad culture that was given to us. It's not so much culture we chose. But be conscious about sort of breaking out of that. And even then, there are going to be some people who think long term and some people who don't. But I think that our proportions are a little off balance. We tend to have an encouragement of short term thinking as opposed to the majority of us thinking long term, and that's where the unhealthiness kind of comes into play.
Yeah, and I think I guess from statistically, some of our culture, we can have children kind of young, so you may be able to connect with three generations, right? You may have grandma, you may have three generations in a household for our culture. But I think we only see each other in those three generations. You said you want your great grandkids to know who you were because of the decision that you made. I think if we actually saw our connection to a longer legacy, and you'd be like, you know what, my great grandmother was actually thinking about me, and this is why she bought this house in North Carolina on this corner, because she was thinking about not just herself in that moment, she was thinking about all of us who would come afterwards. And I think because our family trees aren't as deep, we don't feel as attached to a historical legacy, even though our legacy goes back further than anybody else's. Therefore, it's hard for us to forecast one that's long ahead of us at the same time, you know? So, yeah.
You know, that's an excellent point you just made. I think that, you know, I know personally, you know, my biological father did not raise me. You know, it was my stepfather. And what I didn't notice until I got older was I noticed that in my life, I have the great fortune of being in a great relationship with a woman who happens to be a therapist. And I was doing some self-exploration. And I said, it's really interesting. When I think about my life, it's like I don't really have a lot of attachments. Like I don't have a lot. Like you tell me to name three friends I have from college that I still have today, I can't name three friends. You know, because it's like I move from one stage to the next, and I would just attach while I'm there, detach, move to the next stage, attach, then detach, then move to the next stage. You know, and I was like, what is that about me? I don't like that about myself. And I believe that part of it might have had to do with growing up and not knowing anything about my father's side of the family from a biological standpoint, made me feel like I was like a tree with no roots. You know, and when you're a tree with no roots, you have freedom in that the tree can just move around, but also you're missing something because you don't have that foundation. You
Yeah.
know, and so I think that for all of us, I think we think about slavery. A lot of us as a community are trees without roots, in the
Yeah.
sense that, you know, we don't really know anything about ourselves before we arrived on the slave ships. And
Yeah.
that is incredibly damaging because we see ourselves as slaves who have come up, as opposed to you know, leaders, kings, and queens, and great people who just had, you know, who just had a down cycle. You know what I mean? Who just had a bad 400 years, but 400 years ain't nothing when you compare it to 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 years.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. The biggest, so the what we bought into is the American dream, and the American dream, I think is actually, it's actually modern day slavery, but it's masked as the American dream. So the American dream says go to college, right? Get a single family home, and then get a good job, right? But when you look at those things, going to college today actually means that you're graduating with debt. So you are starting behind, and your high school homie who went on to become a plumber or electrician or a mechanic, it's actually going to take you 25 years to catch up to them financially, right? Because of the debt that you went into. Then you get a single family home and all the debt that comes with that, and you actually feeling trapped. In fact, I joke sometimes the best way for an employer to retain somebody is to help them get a home. Because now you got them locked in for 30 years. You help them get a home, you help them buy a home that is a little bit bigger than they can actually afford, you're going to have their employment for 30 years. Right. And so so there's that. And then finally, one single income. Right. And we know that the wealthiest people in the world, they typically have 7 streams of income. But we've been sold, as we talked about earlier, on the highest paying job as the way to success. And so the American dream is actually modern day slavery when you think about it, because then you have student loans taking 30% for 10 years. Then you have a mortgage taking 30% for 30 years. And then you have a consumer debt. And at the end of the day, you're actually left with very little. You're left with very little, despite the fact that you've checked off all the boxes on the American dream. You be good, get good grades, go to good school, and get a good job. You've checked off all those boxes, but you still don't feel any freer. And if that was the American dream, if college was the American dream, if a good job was the American dream, why aren't more people free? Why aren't more people free? Right? Why are so many people hate the work that they do on a daily basis? Why are people extending their work after the retirement age? Because they realize that they didn't stack up enough. They didn't make the right decisions when they were younger to actually position themselves to actually stop at 35, 65. And then on top of that, we're living longer. So the idea of retiring at 65 and having enough bread stacked up, like this pile stacked up, for 30 years. The whole system is designed to keep you in perpetual debt. And then if you do manage to stack up something and retire, then what happens to that retirement? It just goes down and down and down, and then you die with nothing to pass on. That's literally the pile method. And so instead of doing the pile method, I've been focused on the pipeline method. And the pipeline is meaning that I'm building a pipeline. I don't want a pile. I want a pipeline that's going to continue to pour in every single month indefinitely, not just a pile. I'd rather, tell me this, would you rather a pipeline that puts $10,000 into your family bank every month indefinitely, or $500,000? Which would you prefer?
And the indefinite method. I mean, the indefinite approach sounds better to me.
And it's actually easier to attain. It's actually easier to get to $10,000 a month in semi or passive income than it is to actually create $500,000, a stash of $500,000 cash. I believe.
Wow. Well, man, I think that everything you're saying makes great sense, and I think that the challenge for a lot of us is, it comes off like it's a really complicated process, and it can be complicated, but a lot of it's very simple. I think that, for example, just having, things like life insurance in place, life insurance don't cost hardly nothing. That's important in terms of your legacy after you're gone. While you're here, I always go back to when I tell my students in the stock market program about the monkey experiment when it comes to stock investing, and how the monkeys invested in stocks and they made more money than people who were, who weren't investing, also, when you think about it, what you mentioned earlier, when you said that, when you go to college and you go deep in the hole, and you're thinking that accelerated income is going to pull you out of that hole. And you compare that to somebody, your friend who went to trade school, for 6 months or a year, or learned to start a business, and they never went in that hole. You never catch up with that person. It reminds me when I was in high school and I ran the 400-meter dash. And I logically thought that if you just save your energy for the first half of the race, you could catch up at the end, when you're running fast. And my coach said, no, he said, if you get off to a slow start, you can't catch up, and investing is kind of the same way. And in fact, I actually wanted to share this chart I pulled up so you guys can kind of look at this. And what this kind of shows is just a very crude example. And actually in the Black Stock Market program, I go into more detail with this type of stuff. But this kind of shows, like, this is two people that started investing. One started investing at 15. The other one started at 25, 10 years later. And you see that the person that started at 15 has a lot more money at 65. I don't know exactly the amount they're investing, but they're investing the same amount. And you see that the blue curve represents the person who started early. The red curve represents the person who started late. So what they actually find mathematically is, even if the person who started late invests double of what the person who started early does, they still can't catch up. And so the best way to explain it would be, if you and I are in cars and you go, you're going 50 miles an hour and you drive for 20 hours, and so you clear 1,000 miles. So I get in the car and I think, okay, I'm gonna catch them. I'm gonna drive, 100, or I'm gonna drive 90 miles an hour. If we're driving, say, from New York to LA, I'm still not gonna catch you, because you're 1,000 miles ahead. I would literally have to have an airplane to be able to catch you at that point, because you've gotten so far ahead. Because the number one factor in investing equations is time. Time is the most valuable, underappreciated asset that people own. When you have a young child and you want to make that child wealthy, the most valuable asset your child has is time. And so us wasting $1.3 trillion in Black income every year doesn't bother me as much as us wasting several $trillions in time that could be used to grow these assets that we could have in our community.
100%. So what principle that I think we need to add is that you don't work for yourself or your own consumption. You actually are working for your children. Because now, if I actually start my daughter's compound curve at the age of 0, right? So I'm working, right? But I'm starting my daughter's compounding curve at the age of 0. Because most people don't start that compound interest or any sort of savings until they start working at the age of 22, if they went to college, right? But what if I'm like, I'm not doing this for me. I'm actually doing this for my daughter, who's now 0, who's just born, and I'm taking what I put there. And now she's gonna, at the age of 22, her compound interest curve is already gonna be up here at the age of 22. I think that's the issue, is that most people don't start working or thinking about savings or retirement till 22. You've lost 22 years of compounding interest because the previous generation wasn't able to, or didn't actually think about you in that kind of way. You only get one compound interest curve in your entire life, and you better start it as early as you possibly can if you actually want to see the hockey stick that most people look for when they're looking for get rich quick schemes and things of that nature. That's what a lot of get rich quick schemes do. That they look at as this opportunity to make up for the compound interest curve that I didn't take advantage of when I was younger. It's like, this is how I can make up time. But a lot of people end up wasting all kinds of money pursuing these things that aren't as promising as the tried and true investments that are out there, from real estate to stocks and other things. But we got to figure out how to start earlier. If you know that you started late, then wouldn't it make sense to start your children off earlier on their behalf, even if they aren't thinking about it? It just makes sense. But I guess I don't know if it's nearsighted or short-sighted when you can't see far ahead.
Well, what I would say, to your point, first of all, everybody who's listening, I would encourage you to do one important thing. Go and go take a look at my $5 a day investing plan. It's out there somewhere. I know there's a book on Amazon. If you want to get it there, you can, but it's floating around somewhere. And the reason I put that together is because it actually started off as a concept that I refer to as the $500,000 Happy Meal. And what I did was I set this up to basically help people connect the fact that we spend so much money on things like fast food or shoes or whatever, and that money, if that spending power is turned into investing power, it becomes explosive power. It's literally almost like a nuclear bomb in terms of what happens to a dollar when you spend it at on fast food versus what happens if you spend that dollar on investing. And so what I do in mathematically is, to your point, is I basically say, let's say that you take $5 a day, which you go to Starbucks for $5. You may or may not come out with one cup of coffee. You can't come out with coffee and something to eat for $5. You can't even go to McDonald's. I don't think you can get a value meal for less than that. They probably got the 99-cent menu, but $5 ain't gonna get you much at McDonald's. So let's say you take that amount, that $5 a day, and instead, in addition to doing whatever you do with your regular money, you have $5 a day you put in stock investing. And what I did was I showed with the charts. If you base it on the historical performance of the stock market, which has been very consistent over the last 60, 70, 80, 100 years, going all the way back to before the Great Depression, the stock market has always been a great place to make money. That's why Warren Buffett swears by, stuff like that. So if you base it on that history, and a person just put $5 a day into just buying stocks or whatever, I think after 10 years, the person had about $20,000. After 20 years, they had about $102,000. After about 30 years, they had $275,000. After 40 years, they had somewhere around $750,000, right? $5 a day. So you're in poverty. You are a single mom who works as a waitress, and you don't think you have much. Well, you've got the ability to do something extraordinary for your child or for your grandchild, but you got to start early. You can't start late. And so what's happening in that equation, the reason that people don't believe it, every time other financial experts are able to do something similar to this, because it's all about knowing the math, right? And every time I've seen somebody do it, somebody did it on the Oprah show. It was a white guy named David Bach, who wrote a book called The Automatic Millionaire. And when I saw it, I knew what it was, because I've been a finance professor for 25 years. I was like, oh yeah, that's a good one. That's a good magic trick, right? And so he does this, and he basically just takes a small amount of money, and and then on the Oprah show, he hauls out this big tray with $100 bills on it, and all the women are screaming like, ah, because they don't believe that this amount of investing turned into that much money. Right. But the thing is, that's what they call the magic of compound interest. Albert Einstein actually said the strongest force in the universe is compound interest. Yep. Even Einstein, who created the theory of relativity, who understands black holes and all different things about the universe, he said the math behind compound interest is amazing to me, because it clearly shows that a poor person can become a rich person in a generation just by being consistent. Just by being consistent. Right. So that's what I just tell people. I say, look, you ain't got to do nothing special. Just be consistent. You ain't got to be a financial expert. Just be consistent. And that's what my grandmother gave me was my grandmother. Now, mind you, my grandmother, the big mistake my grandmother did make, rest her soul, love her to death. But while she introduced me to investing and financial psychology in a productive way, my grandmother was cursed by the myth that the stock market was a dangerous place. That's not a place you put your money. They're going to take it. They're going to rip you off everything. So in the stock market investing class, I have to spend time helping to break down those myths and explaining why they're not true. Right. So that's the one mistake my grandmother made. But in every other category, in terms of that consistency and that discipline and just doing the same little thing every single day, you that's what you can learn from your grandma.
Yeah.
So we know what we need to do. Now the question is, are we going to do it, or who's going to do it now? Who's going to wait? You guys tell me.
Yeah. So for me, so when I think about what you said about your grandmother and the lessons, I think we look at the past generation and we say, I love what they did here. I don't love what they did here. And I think we learned from that. And so I'm just trying to think about my parents. My parents, I come from privilege, so and I fully acknowledge that. And I was blessed, and they are great providers. When I think about my parents, they actually went after. I don't think they were doing the work that they did for money. I think they were both committed to healing. My dad did oral surgery. My mom did anesthesia. But I actually witnessed my mom go through some hard times when anesthesia just wasn't popping in the way that it was. And though I grew up in a great neighborhood, I actually witnessed her lose everything because of this idea of this one job is going to carry me to the promised land. And so I'm a living example. And that's kind of what shaped my path, is that I recognize that one job and one high paying job, even with a lot of education, wasn't actually the key to success and freedom, because I witnessed somebody lose it all. There weren't any safeguards when you have a job. What do they say? You can't pass a job down to the next generation, right? So I'm trying to think what I would do, what else I would do differently than my parents. My dad came from nothing, and I mean, or literally barefoot in Jamaica. So he was very prudent financially. I do think there is a balance between saving for the next generation and enjoying. My dad, he's a Scrooge. He's a Scrooge, and I'm actually grateful because he taught me how to live simply. He really taught me how to live simply. So I'm just trying to reflect on my parents' life and how they manage money. But I'll be honest with you, there weren't too many money conversations. Anything that I've learned about money, I actually had to go learn on my own. And I don't think we have enough money conversations in our households. And I know you have your family meeting every Sunday where you make investment decisions in the family and things of that nature. But money just so taboo, whether a family has it or they don't have it. Money just seems to be a taboo conversation. And I'm not sure where the young people in a household actually get to learn about money. My daughter knows that with her piggy bank, she buys houses. I show her the houses that we own, and she knows. I say, what do we buy with that? She says houses. Like, that's her mindset now, is we buy houses. You know what I'm saying? And we provide great housing for other people who don't have houses. That's what she knows. But I don't remember getting any conversation. People talk about, oh, we need to have the conversation about the birds and the bees, but where are the conversations about money actually happening? I don't think they occur.
Well, the funny thing is that we don't talk about money, but we talk about it all the time.
Right.
We treat it a little bit like the conversations about the birds and the bees, right? Like, we know sex is everywhere. People are constantly thinking about it. You see it on television all the time, et cetera. But a lot of families won't talk about it, right? So it's like the elephant in the room, and we all spend our whole lives pretend like the elephant's not there, right?
Yeah.
But then somebody gets stepped on by the elephant, and,
Right.
and you're wondering, like, well, what happened? Well, because you didn't talk about the fact that the elephant's there, and you need to stay on this side of the living room where the elephant will step on you, right?
Right.
And so I think that when you talk about conversations about money, it makes no sense for money to be a taboo discussion in the family. I think that the reason it might be taboo is because money is so powerful, just like sex is very powerful. Think about it. Sex it ain't just about people getting their freak on. Sex is literally the foundation for the creation of all human life. There's nothing more powerful than our survival, our ability to give life. So
yeah.
So it's something that powerful. I would imagine maybe we just don't want to just go in that space because it can just get messy and scary and bad things can happen. So with money, There's a lot of trauma associated with money. There's a lot of conniving nonsense that happens over money. People get killed over money. So, there's stress over money, a lot of financial anxiety. In fact, in the Black Business School, that's why now we have our support groups in the Black Business School, because financial anxiety was so high. Like the number one factor that stresses people out is money. And so the very same reasons that you want to avoid talking about money are the reasons why you should be talking about money. Right.
Right.
Like if something gives us anxiety, we don't want to talk about it, but you need to talk about it.
Right.
Funny. So I would almost say to parents that, and I love the fact that you do that with your daughter, because what you're doing is you're just breaking a cycle. Your parents were great. They were amazing. They did great things, but you took what they gave you and then you just added to it, that's what you're supposed to do. Your daughter is going to see something. She's going to catch a blind spot that you might be missing, and she's going to take it to the next level. That's called generational progress to me. And so I think that that those conversations about money have to happen, because everybody is thinking about money constantly. The only thing people might think about more than sex is probably money. Or people like, you got Cardi B rapping about trading sex for money. She would use sex to lure men in so she could steal their money, right? So sex go hand in hand. They're deeply connected. And those are two things people don't talk about. So I would argue that if given that your child is going to need money, they're going to want money, they're going to stress out over money, then you probably want to teach them the right ways to go make money, so that they're not doing unethical things to make money, or enslaving themselves to make money, or dealing with anxiety in order to make money. Again, just like sex, like you talk to your daughter about the birds and the bees at some point, you're going to say, look, here's what it is. Here's how you do it in a way that's not going to put you in harm's way. Right. So we got to talk about the elephant in the middle of the room. No excuses for that.
100%. So I actually want to show you something. I know you were running the table, and you may already have this in the book, but I want to share my screen really quickly and show everybody what did you call it? The happy meal. What did you call the happy meal plan?
The $500,000 happy meal.
The $500,000 happy meal. Let me see. Daily gain. All right. So let me share my screen. And this is what I actually call millionaire math, y'all. We are taught basic arithmetic and things of that nature in grade school or whatnot, but this is called millionaire math. This is how you actually do amortization tables and things of that nature, know how much your mortgage is going to cost you. This is the math that you need to know. I don't care if you flunked out of calculus. Guess what? That doesn't matter. You don't need to know calculus to be a millionaire. Okay. So Dr. Watkins was talking about doing the Happy Meal plan. So basically the Happy Meal plan over 1,001 days, over 1,000 days, which is about 3 years. Basically, for every $5 you put in, you're actually making 75 cents a day. That's what it averages out to. So over the course of 1,000 days, you put in about $4,995. Your total value, because of the interest at 10%, is $5,074, meaning you made $750. You divide that $750 by 1,000, and basically for every $5 you put in each day, and it's still your money, you are actually getting an additional 75 cents. Now watch this. We change this to $10 a day contribution, meaning $300 a month. Now, for every $10 you put in, you're getting $1.50 back added to your personal economy. That's extremely powerful. And if I run this even longer than 3 years, and like you said, we're doing this for 30 years, these numbers will only grow and increase. So I love that plan. I think it's the Acorn. Is it Acorns, where you can actually, whatever change is left off of, whatever change is left, you can actually automatically invest it into some sort of index fund?
Yep. Yeah, Acorns allows you to invest your spare change in your credit card. If I'm not mistaken, I could have swore I saw the Stash was implementing something like that.
Okay, Stash right there.
Yeah, whatever it is that you pick, just make sure you're doing something consistent every week, and just set it and forget it. That's what David Bach refers to as the automatic millionaires. Automatic millionaires are all these millions of people out here that are millionaires, and you would never guess it because they drive a pickup truck and wear, Walmart jeans or whatever. Yep. But it's mainly because they've just done the same thing consistently over time. It's just like, now people see me doing my half marathons and all that because I'm trying to lose weight. I don't run fast. I just make sure I'm always moving forward. I walk as much as I run. That's the secret. I don't really run an entire 13 miles. That's painful. But I'm always moving forward. And then next thing you know, I've covered 13 miles. And investing's that same way. The automatic millionaires are just people who just consistently plop, just consistently put their money in the stock market. If the market goes up, said they're putting the same amount in. Market goes down, they're putting the same amount in. If it's a great economy, they're putting the same amount in. If the economy's going terrible, then they put the same amount in. And then next thing you know, 30 years later, they've got $1 million in assets to leave to their kids, and they got a big fat life insurance policy. So really, I want to just give people this one challenge, as we finish up. And I'll let you do more than talking about. I don't mean to talk so much if I did.
I'm good.
But I'll say this: the challenge I will give you is, I need people in here right now that are listening to make a commitment to me that if you are struggling financially, you will only struggle for this generation. I understand, maybe, you can't control what somebody did before you. Maybe somebody in your family did something trifling and didn't leave any money or put you in a bad situation. You got all kinds of crazy creative stories in our community. Like when I was 2 years old, my mama put the phone bill in my name and messed up my credit. Right. Mm-hmm. It happens. Yeah. And that's fine. And some of that is hard to fix, but there's no excuse for your children to be to struggle financially. No excuse. No excuse for your grandchildren to struggle financially. So I need you to make a commitment right now that after that, this is the last generation. I'm going to break the cycle. So I want you to just commit to breaking that cycle. That means teaching economic principles, sticking to codes of conduct when it comes to your economics, engaging in some sort of investment pattern, no matter how small, that's going to be consistent so that 20, 30 years down the line, there will be a substantial accumulation of wealth, little things like that. Just commit right now. Just make that comment right now that I commit, I promise I'm going to break the cycle. And that way we can make some progress today instead of us just getting together and just talking. Because if you forget talking, we got to do some doing.
Yeah. And for your children, my challenge to you is for every gift you give, make sure you match it with an investment. So if you do want to buy your son or your daughter the Jordans and they're going to cost $200, then make sure that you actually put in $200 in investment too. So go ahead and use an expense. I want you to enjoy life now. We're not asking you to be Scrooges throughout your entire life and never spend and enjoy what you've worked hard to get. But if you're going to buy the $200 pair of Jordans, don't let that max you out, right? Go ahead and make a $200 investment in a CD or a bond or a stock at the same time. Now, if you realize, but I don't have 400, I only have 200, then guess what? You need to go buy a $100 pair of shoes, right? Instead, and get a $100 investment for your child. That is going to put them in a better position than looking fly at school before it rains and all of a sudden those Jordans got mud on them and all of a sudden there's no value to them whatsoever. All right. So that would be my challenge, just to change that one thing. If you do spend and you spend it on something that is just money out the door, make sure that it's matched by money that's going to go into your personal economy.
Well, I love that, man. I don't have anything else to add. I think you kind of nailed it down, and this is your conversation, brother. And I appreciate you letting me participate.
Come on, man. you the leader in the space, man. So keep educating, and we appreciate you on the Black Business School. And we hope you enjoy this video. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel, like this, comment, let us know how you're going to change a particular pattern for your family to leave generational wealth. All right. Peace, everybody.
Let's break the cycle. All right. Take care, everybody. Peace.